Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Perfect Life. Robert Bobby Hayes stood in his home office, reviewing the quarterly reports for his construction company, Hayes and Associates. At 42, he had built an empire from nothing, starting with a single bulldozer inherited from his father and transforming it into the largest excavation and demolition company in 3 counties. His calloused hands told the story of a man who had worked his way up from operating heavy machinery to commanding a fleet of them. The sprawling ranch house in Millfield Estates reflected his success. 6 bedrooms, a 3-car garage, and 8 acres of perfectly manicured land. Bobby had bought it 5 years ago as a symbol of what hard work and determination could achieve. More importantly, it was meant to be the foundation for the family he and his wife Linda were building together. Linda Hayes, named Morrison, had been the catch of their small town. A former beauty queen turned real estate agent, she possessed the kind of effortless charm that made clients trust her instantly. At 38, she maintained her striking blonde hair and athletic figure with religious dedication to yoga and Pilates. When they married 12 years ago, everyone said they were the perfect couple, the self-made man and the sophisticated woman who could navigate any social situation. Their son Trevor, now 16, had inherited his mother's quick wit and his father's stubborn determination. A star quarterback at Millfield High, he seemed destined for greatness. Their daughter Sophia, 14, showed early signs of her mother's social intelligence and her father's business acumen, already running successful fundraising campaigns for her school. But perfection, Bobby had learned, was often an illusion. The first crack in his perfect world had appeared 6 months ago during a family barbecue. Linda had been unusually distracted, constantly checking her phone and claiming it was work emergencies. Real estate was busy, sure, but Bobby had built his fortune by paying attention to details others missed. The way she held her phone at an angle when typing, the nervous laugh when asked about her late meetings, the new expensive perfume she claimed was a gift from a client. These weren't the behaviors of someone discussing property listings. Bobby had survived the ruthless world of construction by trusting his instincts. Those same instincts now screamed that something was fundamentally wrong with his marriage. He had built his empire on the principle that knowledge was power, and he intended to gather all the knowledge he needed. The children had begun showing signs of strain as well. Trevor had become increasingly disrespectful, questioning Bobby's authority and making snide comments about old-fashioned values. Sophia, once Daddy's little girl, now seemed to view him with barely concealed disdain. They rallied around their mother whenever Bobby questioned anything, forming a united front that felt more like an armed rebellion. Bobby's own background had shaped him into someone who didn't accept betrayal lightly. Raised by a single father after his mother abandoned them when he was 8, he had learned early that loyalty was the most valuable currency in the world. His father, Frank Hayes, had worked himself to death rather than abandon his son, teaching Bobby that a man's word was his bond and that betrayal was unforgivable. The construction industry had reinforced these lessons. In a world where a handshake could mean millions of dollars and trust determined whether projects succeeded or failed, Bobby had built his reputation on absolute reliability. He had destroyed competitors who tried to undercut him with false promises, and he had elevated partners who proved their loyalty. It was a simple code. Loyalty was rewarded, betrayal was punished, and second chances were for the weak. As Bobby closed his laptop and prepared for another evening of pretending everything was normal, he reflected on how his father's lessons had prepared him for many things, but not for the possibility that his own family might become his enemies. The thought should have devastated him, but instead, it crystallized his resolve. If his family had chosen to betray him, they would learn the same lesson he had taught his business competitors over the years. In Bobby's world, loyalty was everything, and betrayal came with a price that had to be paid in full. Chapter 2. The Discovery. The truth came to Bobby on a Tuesday evening in March, delivered by an unlikely messenger. Danny Morrison, Linda's younger brother, had always been the family's black sheep, a small-time gambling addict who bounced between jobs and relationships. He appeared at Bobby's office after hours, nervous and sweating despite the cool spring air. "Bobby, we need to talk," Danny said, unable to meet his brother-in-law's eyes. "It's about Linda." Bobby had known this moment would come eventually. For months, he had been conducting his own investigation with a methodical precision that had made him successful in business. Hidden cameras in strategic locations around the house, GPS tracking on Linda's car, and careful analysis of financial records had painted a picture he didn't want to see but couldn't ignore. Danny's confession merely confirmed what Bobby already suspected. Linda was having an affair with Craig Hoffman, a successful plastic surgeon who had recently divorced his own wife. Dr. Hoffman, 45 years old and devastatingly handsome, owned a practice in the city and drove the kind of luxury cars that turned heads. More damaging than the affair itself was the systematic way Linda and the children had been lying to cover it up. "Trevor and Sophia know," Danny admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "They've been covering for her for months, taking turns being alibis when she goes to see him. They think you're some kind of dinosaur who doesn't deserve the truth." The children's betrayal cut deeper than Linda's infidelity. Bobby had sacrificed everything to provide for his family, working 18-hour days to build the company that paid for their privileged lifestyle. Every vacation, every private school tuition, every designer outfit had been funded by his sweat and determination. To discover that his own children viewed him with contempt was almost unbearable. But Bobby Hayes hadn't built an empire by wallowing in self-pity. "Why are you telling me this?" Bobby asked Danny directly. Danny shifted uncomfortably. "Because Craig's been sniffing around Mom's house. Our mother is 83 years old, Bobby, and she's got that big insurance policy. Craig's been real interested in her health lately, offering to review her medications, talking about how she should update her will. I think he's planning something, and I can't let that happen." This revelation transformed Bobby's understanding of the situation entirely. Dr. Craig Hoffman wasn't just stealing his wife. He was a predator who saw vulnerable people as opportunities. Bobby's methodical investigation had revealed that Craig's recent divorce had been financially devastating. His ex-wife had taken half his assets, and his practice was struggling with malpractice insurance costs. A lonely, wealthy widow like Danny's mother would be an attractive target. Bobby spent the next week conducting deeper research into Craig's background. What he discovered was illuminating. Craig had been married 3 times before his recent divorce. His first wife had died in what was ruled an accidental overdose of prescription medication. His second wife had suffered a series of mysterious health crises that required expensive treatments at Craig's clinic. His third wife had divorced him after discovering he had been systematically drugging her to make her more compliant. None of these discoveries had resulted in criminal charges. Craig was too smart for that. But they painted a picture of a man who viewed relationships as business transactions and people as resources to be exploited. Linda, with her successful real estate career and access to Bobby's wealth, was simply his latest target. The realization that his wife and children had aligned themselves with a dangerous predator completed Bobby's transformation. He was no longer a betrayed husband seeking answers. He was a protector preparing for war. His family had made their choice, and now they would live with the consequences of that choice. Bobby began making careful preparations. His father had taught him that when you strike an enemy, you strike once and you strike to end the fight permanently. He would need to be patient, methodical, and absolutely ruthless. The construction business had taught him how to tear down structures completely, leaving nothing salvageable behind. Dr. Craig Hoffman had chosen the wrong family to destroy, and Linda Hayes had chosen the wrong man to betray. They would both learn that Bobby Hayes was not the kind of man who forgave or forgot. The time for pretending had ended. Now it was time to build a trap so perfect that his enemies would walk into it willingly, believing they were about to claim their ultimate victory. Chapter 3: The Architect of Ruin. Bobby's plan began with a careful study of his enemy's weaknesses and desires. He approached it like any major construction project: detailed blueprints, precise timing, and contingency plans for every possible complication. The difference was that this project was designed to destroy rather than build. Craig Hoffman's weakness was his greed and his need to maintain his public image as a successful doctor. Linda's weakness was her desire for social status and her belief that she was smarter than everyone around her. The children's weakness was their teenage certainty that they understood the world better than their father. Bobby's first move was financial. He began systematically moving assets out of joint accounts and investments, using his knowledge of business structures to create a maze of legal entities that would be nearly impossible to untangle quickly. He wasn't stealing. Everything he moved was legally his, but he was ensuring that when the time came, Linda would discover that her luxurious lifestyle was built on quicksand. Simultaneously, he used his connections in the construction and real estate industries to gather intelligence on Craig's financial situation. What he learned was even worse than he had suspected. Craig owed nearly $2 million in malpractice settlements that hadn't been publicly disclosed yet. His practice was hemorrhaging money, and he was desperately seeking investors to keep it afloat. This information gave Bobby the perfect opening for his trap. Using a shell company, Bobby approached Craig about investing in a new medical facility. The proposal was irresistible, a state-of-the-art plastic surgery center that would cater to wealthy clients seeking complete discretion. Bobby, posing as a silent partner through intermediaries, offered to provide the initial funding in exchange for a controlling interest in the facility. Craig's greed overcame his caution. Within weeks, he had signed contracts that effectively put him completely at Bobby's mercy, though he didn't realize it yet. The contracts contained clauses that would allow Bobby to call in the entire investment immediately if certain conditions weren't met, conditions that Bobby could trigger at will. While setting this financial trap, Bobby also worked on gathering evidence of Linda's affair that would be devastating in divorce proceedings. His hidden cameras captured not just the infidelity itself, but Linda and Craig planning to manipulate Bobby's mother-in-law's will. They discussed how Linda would convince the elderly woman to change her beneficiaries, cutting out Danny and leaving everything to Linda, who would then share it with Craig. The children's participation in these schemes was perhaps the most heartbreaking discovery. Trevor had been tasked with stealing documents from Bobby's home office, photographing financial records that Craig wanted to analyze. Sophia had been manipulating her grandmother during visits, subtly planting ideas about how Bobby was financially irresponsible and how Linda would be a better steward of the family money. Bobby realized that his entire family had become conspirators in a plot not just to betray him, but to systematically steal everything he had built. They weren't just having an affair. They were conducting a careful campaign to destroy him financially and emotionally. The depth of their planning revealed something chilling about their characters. This wasn't a crime of passion or a moment of weakness. It was a calculated, long-term strategy to use Bobby's love for his family against him. They had counted on his trust, his desire to maintain family harmony, and his reluctance to believe the worst about people he loved. They had miscalculated fatally. Bobby spent the remaining weeks of spring putting the final pieces of his plan into place. He arranged for Craig's malpractice issues to become public knowledge at precisely the wrong moment. He ensured that Linda's real estate license would be questioned due to ethical violations in her handling of client funds, violations that Bobby carefully documented and reported to the state licensing board. Most importantly, he prepared to reveal the truth about their scheme in a way that would maximize the damage to their reputations and their futures. Bobby's plan wasn't just about ending his marriage or exposing the affair. It was about ensuring that everyone who had betrayed him would face consequences severe enough that they would never be tempted to cross him again. The construction business had taught Bobby that when you demolished a building, you had to be absolutely certain that nothing salvageable remained. The same principle applied to his marriage and his relationship with his children. By the end of May, everything was in place. Bobby had built the perfect trap, and all that remained was to spring it at the moment when his enemies felt most confident of their victory. Chapter 4. The Setup. Bobby's opportunity came in early June when Linda announced she was planning a girls' weekend in the city. The lie was so transparent, it was almost insulting. Bobby knew she would be spending the weekend with Craig at his penthouse apartment. More importantly, he knew that Craig had planned to use this weekend to introduce Linda to his business associates as his new investor in the medical facility project. What Craig didn't know was that those business associates were actually investigators Bobby had hired, posing as potential clients for the new facility. They would be recording every conversation, documenting Craig's illegal plans to use Linda's money to fund his failing practice, and gathering evidence of his intention to manipulate elderly patients for financial gain. While Linda was in the city playing house with her lover, Bobby prepared for the confrontation that would destroy them both. He had spent weeks positioning all the pieces, and now it was time to execute his plan with surgical precision. The first phase involved his children. Trevor and Sophia had grown increasingly bold in their disrespect, secure in their belief that Bobby was too trusting to discover their betrayal. They had planned to use the weekend of Linda's absence to search through Bobby's office more thoroughly, looking for additional financial documents that Craig wanted. Bobby accommodated their plan perfectly. He left the house Saturday morning, ostensibly to visit his own mother in the next county. In reality, he drove only as far as a hotel where he had set up a temporary command center, complete with monitors showing feeds from all the hidden cameras in his house. He watched as Trevor and Sophia went to work, systematically photographing documents from his safe and computer files. Their efficiency was remarkable. They had clearly done this many times before. Sophia acted as a lookout while Trevor operated the camera, and they communicated with hand signals that suggested extensive practice. The most damaging footage came when they called Linda to report their findings. Bobby recorded both sides of the conversation as they discussed which documents would be most useful to Craig in planning the legal strategy for their eventual divorce proceedings. They talked about Bobby as if he were an obstacle to be removed rather than a father and husband who loved them. Sunday evening, Bobby returned home to find his children watching television in the living room, acting as if nothing had happened. Their casual indifference to their betrayal was the final confirmation he needed that they were beyond redemption. "How was Grandma?" Sophia asked with fake concern. "She's doing well," Bobby replied calmly. "She asked about you kids. I told her you've been very busy with school activities." Trevor smirked. "Yeah, real busy." Bobby smiled back. "I can see that. You both look tired. All that hard work must be exhausting." The children exchanged a glance, but they were too confident in their deception to be concerned. They had no idea that their father had documented every moment of their betrayal, creating evidence that would destroy any sympathy they might expect in the coming divorce proceedings. Monday morning, Linda returned from her weekend looking refreshed and happy. She kissed Bobby goodbye as he left for work, the same performance she had given hundreds of times before. But today would be different. Bobby had arranged for Craig to receive some unexpected news that morning. The malpractice settlements that Craig had been hiding were about to become public knowledge, thanks to an anonymous tip to the Medical Licensing Board. His insurance company would be notified simultaneously, triggering an immediate review of his coverage that would likely result in cancellation. More devastating would be the discovery that his new medical facility investment was actually controlled by Bobby Hayes, the husband of the woman he was sleeping with. The contracts Craig had signed in his desperation would allow Bobby to seize Craig's remaining assets immediately, leaving him with nothing. But Bobby wasn't finished. That evening, he had arranged for his entire family to be home for dinner. Linda had mentioned that Craig would be calling with exciting news about a business opportunity. Instead, Craig would be calling with the news that his world was collapsing and that he suspected Bobby Hayes was responsible. Bobby planned to be sitting at the dinner table with his wife and children when that call came through. He wanted to see their faces when they realized that the man they had trusted to destroy their father was actually the one being destroyed. The trap was set perfectly. All that remained was to enjoy watching his enemies realize they had been outsmarted by the dinosaur they had so thoroughly underestimated. Chapter 5. The Accusation. The call came during dessert on a Tuesday evening in mid-June. Bobby had prepared Linda's favorite meal, grilled salmon with roasted vegetables, and the family was gathered around the dining room table, maintaining the facade of domestic harmony that had become their routine. Linda's phone buzzed, and she glanced at the caller ID with obvious excitement. "I need to take this," she said, starting to rise from her chair. "Actually," Bobby said calmly, not looking up from his plate, "I think we should all hear what Dr. Hoffman has to say." The color drained from Linda's face. Trevor and Sophia froze, their forks halfway to their mouths. The silence stretched for several seconds before Linda's phone stopped ringing. "I don't know what you're talking about," Linda said, but her voice lacked conviction. Bobby finally looked up, his expression neutral. "Really? Because I think Craig is having a very difficult day today. His malpractice insurance was canceled this morning. His medical license is under review, and he just discovered that his new business partner has been investigating him for fraud." Trevor was the first to recover. "Dad, what are you?" "Shut up," Bobby said quietly, and something in his tone made his son's mouth snap closed. "You'll have your chance to talk." Linda's phone rang again. This time, Bobby reached across the table and answered it himself, putting it on speaker. "Linda, thank God." Craig's voice was panicked and shaky. "Something's wrong. Everything's falling apart. Someone's been setting me up, and I think it might be your husband. We need to talk immediately. Can you meet me at—" Bobby ended the call and set the phone back on the table. The silence that followed was deafening. "Now," Bobby said, his voice still calm, "let's discuss the $90,000. Linda's confusion was genuine. "What $90,000? "Bobby, I don't understand what's happening." Bobby had been waiting for this moment for weeks. The $90,000 was the centerpiece of his trap, a sum of money that he had carefully moved and documented to create the perfect opportunity for his family to reveal their true nature. "Trevor," Bobby said, turning to his son, "would you like to explain to your mother how you've been accessing my business accounts?" Trevor's face went white. "I haven't." "Or Sophia," Bobby continued, "would you prefer to tell everyone about the photographs you've been taking of my financial documents?" Both children looked at Linda desperately, seeking guidance that she couldn't provide because she was drowning in her own panic. "The $90,000, Bobby explained with the patience of a teacher addressing slow students, was transferred from our joint savings account to an offshore account that I set up. The transfer was made using access codes that only Trevor could have provided, based on information only Sophia could have gathered from my private files." Linda found her voice. "Bobby, even if the kids made some mistakes, that doesn't mean—" "Stop lying," Bobby roared suddenly, his calm facade finally cracking. The explosion of anger was so violent that Sophia actually flinched backward. "You stole $90,000. Linda stared at him in shock. Around the table, Trevor and Sophia began nodding their heads in agreement. Sophia spoke first. "Dad, we saw the transfers. You've been moving money for months." "Mom's been so worried," Trevor added, his voice gaining confidence as he saw his sister supporting him. "She thinks you're hiding assets to keep her from getting them in the divorce." Bobby looked around the table at his family, his wife and children who were now openly accusing him of theft and deception. Their coordination was flawless, as if they had rehearsed this moment. Even in the face of his anger, they were sticking to their script. The whole family nodded, backing Linda's position against him. In that moment, Bobby realized that they had planned this confrontation too. They were ready to accuse him of financial impropriety, probably as part of Craig's strategy to gain advantage in divorce proceedings. But Bobby had one more card to play. He stood up slowly and walked to the living room, returning with his laptop. "I think," he said, his voice once again deadly calm, "we should all watch some footage." He connected the laptop to the large television mounted on the dining room wall. "Let's see what really happened to that money, shall we?" As the screen flickered to life, their smiles disappeared. The first image showed Trevor in Bobby's office at 2:15 a.m. 3 weeks earlier, photographing bank statements by the light of his phone's flashlight. The timestamp was clearly visible, as was Trevor's face when he looked directly at the camera while stealing his father's financial information. Linda gasped. Trevor tried to speak, but no words came out. Bobby clicked to the next video. This one showed Sophia on the phone in her bedroom, clearly visible through the window as she read account numbers to someone on the other end of the call. The audio was crystal clear. "These are the business accounts," Sophia's voice said. "The ones with the most money in them." One by one, Bobby displayed the evidence of their systematic betrayal. Videos of them planning their searches of his office. Recordings of phone calls with Linda and Craig. Documentation of their attempts to manipulate his elderly mother-in-law. The final video was the most damning. It showed Linda and Craig in his apartment, discussing how they would frame Bobby for financial misconduct while simultaneously stealing his assets. They talked about him with casual cruelty, laughing about his simple-minded trust in his family. When the footage ended, the dining room was completely silent. Linda was crying, but Bobby couldn't tell if the tears were from guilt or fear. Trevor and Sophia sat frozen, staring at the black television screen. The $90,000, Bobby said finally, was moved to protect it from theft, because I knew my own family was conspiring to steal everything I had built. He closed the laptop and looked around the table one final time. Now, he said, let's discuss what happens next. Chapter 6, The Revelation. Bobby's revelation hit the room like a demolition charge, leaving his family sitting in stunned silence among the wreckage of their carefully constructed lies. But he wasn't finished. The evidence he had just shown them was only the foundation for what came next. Linda, Bobby said, his voice carrying the authority of a man who had commanded construction crews through dangerous projects, I need you to call Craig back. Tell him to come here immediately. Bobby, please, Linda whispered. Let's just talk about this. We can work through. Call him, Bobby repeated, and there was something in his tone that made further argument impossible. With shaking hands, Linda dialed Craig's number. When he answered, she could barely speak. Craig, you need to come to the house. Bobby knows everything. I'm not coming anywhere near that psychopath. Craig's voice was loud enough for everyone to hear. Linda, get out of there right now. Pack what you can and meet me at the airport. We're leaving tonight. Bobby took the phone from Linda's unresisting hand. Dr. Hoffman, he said pleasantly, this is Bobby Hayes. I think you and I need to have a conversation. Go to hell, Craig snarled. You think you're so smart, but you have no idea what you're dealing with. Linda and I are going to disappear, and there's nothing you can do to stop us. Actually, Bobby said, I think you'll find that your travel options are somewhat limited. You see, Craig, I've been learning some interesting things about your background. Your first wife's death, for instance. The one that was ruled accidental but never properly investigated. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for several seconds. I don't know what you think you know, Craig said finally, but his voice had lost its confidence. I know that you've been systematically drugging elderly patients to make them more compliant when you discuss their treatment options. I know that you've been overbilling insurance companies for procedures that were never performed. And I know that you killed your first wife when she discovered your medical license fraud. Bobby had spent weeks building this case, working with private investigators and forensic accountants to uncover the truth about Craig Hoffman. What he had discovered was a pattern of behavior that went back over 15 years, a carefully constructed career built on exploitation, fraud, and ultimately murder. You're insane, Craig said, but his voice was shaking now. Perhaps, Bobby agreed, but I'm also thorough. All of this evidence has been turned over to the FBI, the State Medical Board, and the District Attorney's Office. I imagine they'll want to speak with you very soon. The line went dead. Bobby set Linda's phone on the table and looked at his family. Craig won't be joining us tonight, he said. He's probably driving toward the state line as fast as he can, though I doubt he'll make it very far. Linda was staring at him in horror. Bobby, what have you done? I protected my family, Bobby said simply, which is more than I can say for any of you. Trevor finally found his voice. Dad, we didn't know about any of that stuff. We just thought. You thought Craig was a successful doctor who could provide your mother with a better life than her boring husband could, Bobby finished. You didn't care about investigating his background or questioning his motives. You just wanted what he was offering. Sophia was crying now, but Bobby felt no sympathy for her tears. We're sorry, Daddy. We made a mistake. No, Bobby said, his voice final. You made a choice. All of you made choices over and over again for months. You chose to lie to me. You chose to steal from me. You chose to conspire with a predator who was planning to murder my mother-in-law for her insurance money. Linda gasped. What? Oh, yes, Bobby said, turning to his wife. Craig's interest in your mother wasn't romantic. He was planning to increase her medication gradually until she suffered what would appear to be a natural heart attack. He's done it before, and he was planning to do it again. Your mother's $2.3 million life insurance policy was going to fund your new life together. The revelation that they had been accessories to a planned murder seemed to finally penetrate their self-absorption. Linda looked genuinely sick, and both children were staring at their father in shock. "But you stopped it," Trevor said hopefully. "So everything's okay now, right?" Bobby looked at his son with something approaching pity. "Trevor, nothing about this is okay. You and your sister helped a murder plan to kill your grandmother. Your mother entered into a conspiracy to steal everything I've worked for my entire life. And all of you treated me like an enemy who deserved to be destroyed." He stood up from the table, looking down at his family one final time. "The question now," he said, "is what happens to each of you." Bobby walked to the front window and looked out at the circular driveway. Right on schedule. He could see the headlights of several vehicles approaching the house. "Actually," he said, turning back to his family, "I think that question is about to be answered for us." The first vehicle to pull up was an FBI sedan. Behind it came two local police cruisers and an unmarked car that Bobby recognized as belonging to the district attorney's office. Linda's face went white. "Bobby, what did you do?" "I did what I had to do," Bobby said as the first agent approached the front door. "I protected myself from my enemies." The doorbell rang, and Bobby walked calmly toward the front hallway. "The thing about betrayal," he said over his shoulder, "is that it always comes with consequences. You just never bothered to consider what those consequences might be." Chapter 7. The Reckoning. The FBI agents were led by Special Agent Rebecca Torres, a woman in her 40s with the bearing of someone accustomed to dealing with complex financial crimes. Bobby had been working with her for 3 weeks, providing evidence of Craig's medical fraud and Linda's involvement in the conspiracy to manipulate his mother-in-law's will. "Mr. Hayes," Agent Torres said as Bobby opened the door, "we appreciate your cooperation in this investigation. We're here to speak with your wife and children about their involvement with Dr. Craig Hoffman." Bobby stepped aside, allowing the agents to enter his home. Linda, Trevor, and Sophia remained frozen at the dining room table, staring at the badges and official documentation that would tear their lives apart. "Linda Hayes," Agent Torres said, "you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud and elder abuse. You have the right to remain silent." As Agent Torres read Linda her rights, Bobby watched his wife's face cycle through disbelief, anger, and finally terror. She had gambled everything on Craig's promises, never imagining that her boring, predictable husband might be capable of orchestrating her complete destruction. "Trevor and Sophia Hayes," another agent said, approaching the children, "you're both being charged as juveniles for identity theft and fraud. Given your ages, you'll be processed through family court." The twins began crying as the reality of their situation finally penetrated their teenage certainty. They had seen themselves as sophisticated players in an adult game, never realizing they were actually pawns being manipulated by people far more experienced in deception than they could ever imagine. As the agents processed his family, Bobby felt no satisfaction. There was no joy in watching his wife handcuffed or his children led away by social services. But there was a cold sense of completion, like the moment when a controlled demolition brought down a condemned building. Agent Torres approached Bobby as the last of the paperwork was completed. "Mr. Hayes, I want you to know that your evidence was crucial in preventing what could have been a series of murders. Dr. Hoffman's pattern of behavior suggests he's killed at least 3 people over the past decade. What happens to him now?" Bobby asked. "He was arrested trying to cross into Mexico about 2 hours ago," Torres replied. "He'll be extradited back here to face charges including murder, medical fraud, and conspiracy. With the evidence you provided, he'll never see freedom again." Bobby nodded. "And my family? Your wife will likely face 5 to 10 years in federal prison, depending on her cooperation. The children will be processed through juvenile court, but given the severity of their actions and their ages, they'll likely face significant consequences as well." After the agents left, Bobby stood alone in his dining room, looking at the abandoned plates and the laptop that had delivered his family's destruction. The house felt different now, empty in a way that had nothing to do with the absence of people. His phone rang. It was his attorney, Marcus Webb, who had been coordinating the legal aspects of Bobby's plan. "It's done," Marcus reported. "The divorce papers have been filed, citing adultery and fraud. Given Linda's arrest, the court will likely award you everything. The children's trust funds have been frozen pending the outcome of their criminal cases." Bobby had known this moment would come for months, but knowing and experiencing were different things. Everything he had built, his marriage, his family, his role as husband and father, was gone. He had chosen to destroy it all rather than accept betrayal, and now he faced the consequences of that choice. The next few hours passed in a blur of phone calls and documentation. Bobby's mother-in-law called, crying and confused about why Linda had been arrested. His business partners called, concerned about the negative publicity. His own mother called from her nursing home, having seen the news on television. To each of them, Bobby gave the same explanation. His family had made choices that forced him to protect himself and others from their criminal behavior. He felt no need to justify his actions or seek sympathy for his losses. By midnight, Bobby was alone in his house, sitting in his home office where everything had begun. The hidden cameras were still recording, but there was nothing left to capture. His enemies had been defeated, his betrayers had been punished, and his empire remained intact. But victory, Bobby was learning, was a cold comfort when it required destroying everything you had once loved. He thought about his father, who had died alone rather than abandon his principles. Frank Hayes had taught his son that a man's integrity was worth more than comfort, happiness, or even love. Bobby had honored that lesson, but the price had been higher than he had anticipated. Outside, rain began falling on the perfectly manicured grounds of his estate. Inside, Bobby Hayes sat in the silence of his empty house, master of everything he surveyed and utterly alone in his triumph. Chapter 8. The Aftermath. 3 months later, Bobby stood in the marble-floored lobby of the federal courthouse, watching through tall windows as news vans lined the street outside. Craig Hoffman's trial had begun, and the media attention was intense. The story had everything reporters loved: sex, money, murder, and a dramatic reversal that nobody had seen coming. Craig had aged visibly since his arrest. The confident, handsome doctor who had seduced Bobby's wife was gone, replaced by a haggard man in an orange jumpsuit who could barely make eye contact with the cameras. His legal team had tried to negotiate a plea deal, but Bobby's evidence was too comprehensive. The prosecution was seeking the death penalty. Linda's trial had concluded the previous week. She had pled guilty to all charges in exchange for a reduced sentence of 7 years in federal prison. Her attorney had argued that she was a victim of Craig's manipulation, but the recorded conversations between them had made it clear that she was a willing participant in every aspect of their scheme. During her sentencing hearing, Linda had looked directly at Bobby for the first time since her arrest. The beautiful, confident woman he had married was gone. Prison had stripped away her carefully maintained appearance, revealing someone older and harder than he remembered. When given the opportunity to speak before sentencing, she had apologized to the court but never looked at her husband. Bobby felt nothing when she was led away in shackles. The woman he had loved was gone, if she had ever really existed at all. Trevor and Sophia's cases had been handled in juvenile court, but the outcomes were severe. Both had been sentenced to 3 years in juvenile detention, followed by 5 years of supervised probation. They would both turn 18 while incarcerated, and their criminal records would follow them into adulthood. The twins had written letters to Bobby from detention, begging for forgiveness and claiming they understood now how wrong they had been. Bobby had returned the letters unopened. His children had made adult choices, and they would live with adult consequences. His mother-in-law, Dorothy Morrison, had initially blamed Bobby for her daughter's imprisonment. But as the details of Craig's plan to murder her became public, her anger had shifted to confusion and then to grudging gratitude. She had moved to Florida to live with her sister, selling her house and cutting all ties to her former life. Danny Morrison had visited Bobby once after the trials ended, ostensibly to thank him for protecting their mother. But the real purpose of his visit became clear when he asked if Bobby might help him with some gambling debts that had become problematic. Bobby had listened to Danny's sob story with the patience he might show a persistent sales representative. When Danny finished, Bobby had simply said, "No," and shown him to the door. Danny was Linda's brother, which made him part of the family that had betrayed him. Blood meant nothing when trust was broken. The business had continued to thrive despite the scandal. If anything, the publicity had enhanced Bobby's reputation in certain circles. The construction industry respected strength, and Bobby's willingness to destroy his own family rather than accept betrayal had earned him a fearsome respect among his competitors and partners. He had received dozens of offers from women seeking to fill the void left by Linda's absence. Wealthy divorcees, young real estate agents looking for advancement, even some of Linda's former friends who claimed they had always suspected she was unworthy of him. Bobby declined all offers politely but firmly. He had learned too much about the price of trust to risk it again casually. The house felt different now. Bobby had renovated Linda's office and the children's bedrooms, removing all traces of their presence. The dining room where he had confronted them had been completely redesigned. He wanted no reminders of the people who had lived there before. Some evenings, Bobby would walk through the empty rooms and remember what it had felt like to be a husband and father. The memories weren't painful anymore. They felt more like scenes from a movie about someone else's life. That version of Bobby Hayes had died the night he learned about his family's betrayal, and the man who remained was fundamentally different. His father would have approved, Bobby thought. Frank Hayes had always said that a man who compromised his principles for comfort would eventually lose both. Bobby had chosen principles over family, integrity over love, and strength over forgiveness. The cost had been everything he once valued, but he regretted nothing. Outside the courthouse, reporters were interviewing Craig's victims' families. People whose lives had been destroyed by the predator Bobby's family had welcomed into their home. Watching them, Bobby felt the same cold satisfaction he experienced when demolishing a dangerous building. Some structures couldn't be repaired. They had to be torn down completely to protect everyone around them. His marriage had been one of those structures. So had his relationship with his children. Better to destroy them completely than to let them collapse gradually, taking innocent people down with them. Bobby Hayes walked back to his truck, alone but undefeated. He had built an empire once, and he could build another if he chose. But this time, he would build it on foundations that couldn't be shaken by betrayal or weakened by misplaced trust. Behind him, the courthouse doors closed on the final chapter of Craig Hoffman's life of deception. Ahead lay whatever Bobby chose to build from the ashes of his former life. Chapter 9. No Forgiveness. 5 years had passed since the trials ended, and Bobby Hayes stood in the cemetery where his father was buried, holding a letter that had arrived that morning. The envelope bore the return address of the Federal Women's Correctional Facility where Linda was serving her sentence. It was the 15th letter she had sent. Like the others, it remained unopened. Bobby had made a ritual of bringing Linda's letters to his father's grave and burning them, unread. He had no interest in her apologies, her explanations, or her pleas for reconciliation. She had made her choice when she chose Craig Hoffman over her family. Nothing she could say now would change that fundamental reality. The wind picked up as he struck the match, carrying the ashes of Linda's words across the peaceful cemetery grounds. Nearby, other families tended graves and left flowers for loved ones who had earned their grief. Bobby felt no connection to their sorrow. Death was final, but betrayal was worse. It poisoned every memory that came before it. His phone buzzed with a text message from his lawyer. Trevor would be released from juvenile detention in 3 months, and Sophia 6 months after that. Both had requested contact with their father through their social workers. Both requests had been denied. The twins had made their choice as surely as Linda had made hers. They had looked Bobby in the eye and helped a murder plan to steal everything he had built. Their age at the time was irrelevant. They had been old enough to understand the difference between right and wrong, and they had chosen wrong deliberately. Bobby's business empire had grown significantly in the 5 years since his family's betrayal. Hayes and Associates now operated in 4 states, with over 200 employees and contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars. He had built a new headquarters building in the industrial district, a monument to success that bore his name in steel letters 20 feet tall. The new building had no family photos in the executive offices. No pictures of smiling children or anniversary celebrations lined Bobby's desk. He had learned that such displays were vulnerabilities, advertising the existence of people who could be used against him. Better to project strength and isolation than to reveal anything that enemies might exploit. His personal life had settled into a comfortable routine of solitude and control. He lived alone in his renovated house, maintaining the perfect grounds and immaculate interior as a reflection of his internal discipline. He dated occasionally, but never seriously, never allowing anyone close enough to matter. Some might have called it a lonely existence, but Bobby saw it as freedom. He owed nothing to anyone, and no one could disappoint him. He slept well at night, untroubled by guilt or regret. His choices had been necessary, his actions justified, his principles uncompromised. The construction industry had made him wealthy beyond his father's wildest dreams, but more importantly, it had taught him lessons about human nature that no amount of money could buy. People were like buildings. You could never be sure of their structural integrity until you applied pressure. Most would collapse when tested, revealing themselves to be built on weak foundations. Bobby's phone rang as he walked back to his truck. The caller ID showed his mother's nursing home. She was 91 now, and her calls had become increasingly rare as dementia clouded her memory of recent events. Bobby, her voice was thin but lucid. I've been thinking about Linda and the children. Maybe it's time to forgive them. Family is all we have in the end. Bobby listened to his mother's gentle plea with the patience he would show any confused elderly person. She had forgotten, as she often did, the details of what his family had done. In her declining memory, Linda was still the sweet daughter-in-law who brought flowers, and Trevor and Sophia were still innocent grandchildren who deserved love. "Mom," Bobby said gently, "they made their choice. I made mine. That's the end of it." "But Bobby, forgiveness is what separates us from." "From what, Mom? From justice? From consequences? From protecting ourselves from people who would destroy us." His mother was quiet for a moment. "From becoming the kind of people who destroy their own families," she said finally. Bobby ended the call without responding. His mother didn't understand, couldn't understand, what it felt like to discover that the people you loved most had been planning your destruction. She had lived a simple life with a faithful husband who died heroically rather than betray his principles. She had never faced the choice between forgiveness and survival. That evening, Bobby sat in his home office, reviewing the financial reports that showed his continued success. Every number on every page represented his victory over those who had tried to bring him down. He had not merely survived their betrayal. He had thrived because of it, using their treachery as motivation to build something greater than they could have imagined. The house was silent around him, perfectly maintained and completely empty of human warmth. Some men might have found such isolation crushing, but Bobby found it peaceful. He had learned that trust was a luxury he couldn't afford. Love was a weakness that could be exploited, and forgiveness was an invitation for further betrayal. Outside, the grounds of his estate stretched into darkness, protected by security systems and high fences. Inside, Bobby Hayes sat alone with his principles intact and his empire secure. He had paid the price of his integrity in loneliness and isolation, but he considered it a fair trade. His father had died alone rather than compromise his values. Bobby lived alone for the same reason. Some legacies were worth preserving, regardless of the cost. The letter from Linda smoldered in the cemetery ash, its words unread and its promises unheard. Tomorrow would bring another day of solitary success, another day of principled isolation, another day of uncompromising strength. Bobby Hayes had built his empire twice, once on love and trust, and once on strength and discipline. Only the second version had proven capable of surviving contact with human nature. He regretted nothing, forgave no one, and expected nothing from anyone. In his world, that wasn't loneliness, it was wisdom. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Subscribe to Infidelity Tales Lab for more stories. Now, let's begin this one. Chapter 1. The Headache. Brent Ramirez pressed his palm against his daughter's forehead for the third time that evening. Emma's skin burned like desert asphalt in July, yet she shivered under her princess comforter. "Daddy, it hurts," she whimpered, small hands clutching her temples. "Make it stop." 8 years old, and already she'd learned that headaches weren't supposed to last weeks. Brent had been a pharmacist for 12 years, long enough to know that persistent pediatric headaches meant something was wrong. Very wrong. "I know, sweetheart. The doctor's going to figure it out." He smoothed her dark hair, so much like his own. "Try to sleep, okay?" Downstairs, Whitney stood at the kitchen island, her blonde hair pulled into a perfect ponytail, scrolling through her phone with the disinterest of someone checking the weather. His wife of 10 years barely looked up when he entered. "She's worse," Brent said flatly. "Dr. Cuevas said it's probably just stress. Kids get stressed too, you know." Whitney's tone carried that edge it always did lately, dismissive, almost annoyed. "I've been giving her those vitamins he recommended. They'll help." Brent had married Whitney Caldwell fresh out of pharmacy school. She'd been a pharmaceutical sales rep then, beautiful and charming, with an easy laugh that made everyone in the room feel special. That laugh had disappeared somewhere around year 5, replaced by a brittleness he couldn't quite name. "Vitamins don't cure headaches that make a kid cry herself to sleep, Whitney." "Well, maybe if you were here more instead of working 60-hour weeks, you'd see she's just manipulating us for attention." She set down her phone with a sharp click. "I'm with her all day. I think I know my own daughter." "My own daughter. Not our daughter." Brent caught the pronoun, but filed it away. He was too tired for another fight. Their marriage had become a minefield of careful words and cold silences. They shared a house, a daughter, and little else. Brent had stopped trying to fix it months ago. Some things couldn't be repaired with the right prescription. "I'm taking her back to Dr. Cuevas tomorrow," he said. "This isn't normal." Whitney's jaw tightened. "Fine. Waste another copay. But when he tells you the same thing, don't come crying to me." Brent climbed the stairs back to Emma's room. She'd fallen into a fitful sleep, her face scrunched in discomfort, even unconscious. He sat in the chair beside her bed, the same chair where he'd read her stories about brave princesses and clever heroes. His phone buzzed. A text from his sister, Joanna Walton. "How's Emma? Any better?" "Getting worse," he typed back. "Taking her to doctor tomorrow. Want me to come? I could take the day off." Joanna had been his rock since their parents died in a car accident 5 years ago. She'd never particularly liked Whitney, though she'd kept her opinions mostly to herself. Mostly. Not yet. "I'll let you know." He pocketed his phone and watched his daughter's chest rise and fall. The moon cast silver shadows across her room, illuminating the collection of stuffed animals that lined her shelves, gifts from better times when Whitney had actually seemed to love their child. Something nagged at him. Dr. Burton Cuevas was thorough, one of the best pediatricians in Phoenix. If he'd recommended vitamins, he'd have been specific about which ones. Brent made a mental note to check the bottle in the morning, verify the supplement, maybe adjust the dosage. He was a pharmacist. Medicine was his language, his expertise. If something was wrong with what Emma was taking, he'd figure it out. What he couldn't figure out was the cold distance in Whitney's eyes when she looked at their daughter, or why she seemed almost eager for Emma to stay sick. But exhaustion pulled at him, and tomorrow was another early shift at the pharmacy. He kissed Emma's fevered forehead and headed to the guest room, where he'd been sleeping for the past 3 months. The house settled into silence, but Brent's mind wouldn't rest. He stared at the ceiling, counting the cracks in the paint, trying to ignore the feeling that had been growing in his gut for weeks. Something was very, very wrong in his home, and it wasn't just his daughter's headaches. Chapter 2. The Decline. 3 weeks later, Emma could barely get out of bed. Brent sat across from Dr. Burton Cuevas in his office, Medical charts spread between them like accusatory evidence. The doctor's weathered face showed genuine concern, the kind that made Brent's stomach twist. The blood work is puzzling, Dr. Cuevas said carefully. Her liver enzymes are elevated, kidney function is declining, and there's evidence of neurological stress. But there's no clear pathogen, no obvious disease marker. What does that mean? Brent knew what it meant. He'd studied pharmacology, but he needed to hear it from someone else. It means something is affecting her system, but I can't identify what. I'm recommending we admit her for observation and more comprehensive testing. Today, if possible. Brent's hands clenched. Hospital admission. You think it's that serious? I think we need answers before we lose more ground. Dr. Cuevas leaned forward. Brent, as both her doctor and your friend, I'm telling you, something is poisoning her system. Environmental toxin, maybe household chemicals. Or, he hesitated. Or what? Or something she's ingesting regularly. You said Whitney's been giving her vitamins. Every morning. Whitney's diligent about it, actually. More than she is about most things lately. Dr. Cuevas made a note. Bring me the bottle. Everything she's taking. I want to verify the supplements. The drive home felt like swimming through concrete. Brent's mind raced through possibilities, each more frightening than the last. Lead in the water. Mold in the walls. Something in the school. But Emma only got sick at home. On weekends. Never during the school week. Or rather, she'd started improving slightly when she spent days away from the house. Whitney was in the garage when he arrived, loading boxes into her Mercedes. She jumped when he entered, nearly dropping a cardboard box marked winter clothes. Jesus, Brent, you scared me. Dr. Cuevas wants to hospitalize Emma. Run more tests. Her face remained carefully neutral. That seems extreme. Extreme? She's lost 8 pounds in 3 weeks. She can barely stand without getting dizzy. He moved closer, studying her expression. Where are those vitamins? The ones you've been giving her. In the kitchen cabinet. Why? Doctor wants to verify them. Something flickered across Whitney's face, too quick to catch, too deliberate to be innocent. They're just standard multivitamins. From a health food store. Brent pushed past her into the house. The vitamin bottle sat exactly where she'd said, on the middle shelf next to the coffee mugs. He grabbed it, noting the label, Children's Complete Multivitamin with Iron. But something was off. The label looked right, but the bottle felt wrong in his hand. Too light, pills rattling differently than they should. I'll drop these by Dr. Cuevas' office, he said. Now, don't you need to get back to the pharmacy? Whitney's voice had an edge. Hassan texted me asking where you were. Why the hell was Hassan Lynch, his colleague, texting his wife? Brent filed that away too. Emma's more important than inventory counts. He took the bottle and left before Whitney could protest. But instead of driving to Dr. Cuevas' office, he pulled into the parking lot of his own pharmacy. The store was closed for lunch, giving him privacy in the dispensary area where he'd spent thousands of hours counting pills and counseling patients. Under the bright fluorescent lights, Brent examined the bottle with professional scrutiny. He twisted off the cap and poured 3 tablets in his palm. His blood went cold. These weren't multivitamins. The shape was wrong, the coating wrong, the imprint barely visible but definitely not matching any children's supplement he knew. He pulled out his phone and searched the imprint code, L544. The database loaded. Acetaminophen 500 milligrams extra strength. Adult pain reliever. Not toxic in single doses, but given to a child Emma's weight. Every single day for weeks? His hands shook as he poured out more pills. Not all of them were L544. Some were different shapes, different colors. He cataloged each one with growing horror. Diphenhydramine, antihistamine, sedating, pseudoephedrine, decongestant, stimulating. Something he couldn't immediately identify. Small, white, unmarked. This wasn't a vitamin bottle. It was a cocktail of random medications, some contradicting each other, all potentially harmful when mixed and given to a child over weeks. Brent's pharmacist brain kicked into clinical mode, protecting him from the emotional devastation trying to break through. He cataloged symptoms against medications. Headaches. Acetaminophen overdose could cause rebound headaches. Dizziness. the antihistamine decongestant combination. Liver problems, chronic acetaminophen use. The neurological issues. What was that unmarked pill? He took one of the unmarked tablets to the analysis station and ran it through the spectrometer. The machine hummed, processing. The results loaded. Ambien. Zolpidem, 10 milligrams. A sleeping medication. Adult dose. Being given to an 8-year-old child. The room spun. Brent gripped the counter, forcing himself to breathe. This wasn't accidental. You didn't accidentally fill a children's vitamin bottle with a dangerous mix of adult medications. Someone had done this deliberately. Someone was slowly poisoning his daughter. And there was only one person who gave Emma those vitamins every single morning. His wife. Chapter 3. The Truth. Brent didn't go home that night. He couldn't. Not yet. Instead, he sat in his car outside the pharmacy until dark, staring at the bottle of poison that he'd been trusting his wife to give their daughter. His mind spiraled through denial, confusion, and finally, cold fury. Why? The question consumed him. People didn't poison children without reason. Even monsters had motives. His phone rang. Whitney's name flashed on the screen. He rejected the call. 3 more calls came in rapid succession. Then a text. Where are you? Emma's asking for you. You need to come home now. The manipulation was obvious now. The concerned mother act. How long had she been playing him? Another text from an unknown number. This is Dr. Cuevas. Whitney called saying you disappeared with Emma's medications. I'm concerned. Please call me. So Whitney was already building her narrative. Brent the absent father. Brent the unstable one. He called Dr. Cuevas from a blocked number. Burton, it's Brent. Don't tell Whitney you heard from me. Brent, what's going on? She's worried. The vitamins aren't vitamins. They're Ambien, acetaminophen, antihistamines. A mix of adult medications that have been poisoning Emma for weeks, maybe months. Silence. Then, are you certain? I'm a pharmacist. I identified every pill. Someone refilled a children's vitamin bottle with medications that would make a child sick. Chronically sick. And Whitney is the only one who gives Emma those pills. Jesus Christ. Dr. Cuevas's voice dropped. Brent, if this is true. It's true. I have the bottle. I can prove it. Then you need to call the police. Now. And get Emma away from Whitney immediately. I will. But first I need to understand why. And I need evidence that's ironclad. Because if I accuse her and she talks her way out of it, Emma goes right back in her care. What are you going to do? Something I should have done weeks ago. Actually investigate my own wife. Brent ended the call and drove to Joanna's apartment. His sister answered the door in yoga pants and an old college sweatshirt, her dark hair messy. One look at his face, and she pulled him inside. What happened? He told her everything. The pills, the poisoning, the systematic destruction of their daughter's health. Joanna's face cycled through shock, horror, and finally, rage. That fucking psychopath, she breathed. Brent, we have to get Emma out. Tonight. We will. But I need your help first. I need to get into Whitney's computer, her phone, her life. I need to know why she's doing this. You think there's an accomplice? The thought had been growing in Brent's mind since Hassan's strange text to Whitney. Maybe. Or maybe there's something I'm missing. Insurance policies, debt, an affair. Something that makes poisoning our daughter seem like a solution. Joanna grabbed her keys. Then let's go find out. They drove to the house, separately. Whitney's Mercedes was gone, probably out searching for Brent. He let himself in with his key, moving through the dark house like a stranger. Everything looked normal. Clean counters, family photos on the walls, Emma's backpack by the door. A perfectly normal home hiding a perfectly horrifying secret. Her office, Joanna whispered. Whitney's home office was typically locked, but Brent had installed the doors himself. He knew where she hid the key, inside a decorative vase on the nearby bookshelf. The lock clicked open. Inside, Whitney's laptop sat closed on the desk. Brent powered it on, thankful she'd never bother with a password at home. The screen glowed to life. He opened her browser history. What he found made his blood freeze. Search after search after search. How much acetaminophen before liver damage? Symptoms of chronic drug poisoning, undetectable poisons for children. How long until Ambien causes permanent damage? Life insurance payout child death. Munchausen by proxy diagnosis. The dates went back 6 months. Methodical, researched, premeditated. But it was the email correspondence that confirmed his worst nightmare. An open email thread with someone named Douglas Gentry. From Whitney Caldwell Ramirez, she's getting weaker. Doctor wants to hospitalize her. From Douglas Gentry Good. Once she's admitted, they'll find natural causes for organ failure. Keep giving her the pills until then. The policy pays double for hospitalization. From Whitney Caldwell Ramirez, what if Brent figures it out? He's not stupid. From Douglas Gentry, then we frame him for it. He's the pharmacist. He has access to all these drugs. Who do you think they'll believe? Joanna read over his shoulder, her hand covering her mouth. Oh my God, Brent, this is attempted murder, he finished. For life insurance money. He clicked through more emails. Douglas Gentry was Whitney's former co-worker from her pharmaceutical sales days. The affair had started 18 months ago. The insurance policy on Emma, a $500,000 policy Brent had never agreed to, his signature forged, had been taken out 14 months ago. They'd been planning this for over a year. The front door slammed open downstairs. Whitney's voice carried up. Brent, I know you're here. Your car's down the street. Brent quickly plugged a flash drive into the computer and copied everything. Emails, browser history, files, evidence. Upstairs. Joanna hissed, pointing to the window. Fire escape. They climbed out onto the metal platform, just as Whitney's footsteps thundered up the stairs. Through the window, Brent watched his wife enter her office, see the open laptop, and pull out her phone with shaking hands. He couldn't hear what she said, but he could read her lips. He knows. We have a problem. Brent and Joanna made it to Joanna's car without being seen. As they drove away, Brent clutched the flash drive like a lifeline. What now? Joanna asked. Brent's jaw set with cold determination. Now I protect my daughter, and then I make them pay. The police. Eventually. But first, I'm going to ensure they can't escape this. I'm going to trap them so completely, there's no way out. His voice was steel. They wanted to poison Emma slowly, make her suffer, profit from her death. I'm going to return the favor. Brent. They researched Munchausen by proxy. They plan to frame me. They systematically poisoned an 8-year-old child for money. His hands gripped the wheel. I'm not just calling the cops and hoping the system works. I'm making absolutely certain they face consequences. Real ones. Joanna studied her brother's face. The face of a father whose child had been attacked, whose trust had been violated, whose family had been destroyed by greed. Okay, she said quietly. What do you need me to do? Help me get Emma somewhere safe, and then help me set the trap. The pharmacist in Brent knew exactly how to create the perfect dose of revenge, and he was going to make them swallow every bitter pill. Chapter 4. Safe Harbor. Emma was asleep in Joanna's guest room, finally peaceful for the first time in weeks. Brent watched his daughter's chest rise and fall with steady, healthy breaths. No more poison. No more vitamins. He'd picked her up from the house at 3 a.m. while Whitney was passed out from the sleeping pills she'd started taking. Emma hadn't questioned it, just wrapped her small arms around his neck and whispered, Are we having an adventure, Daddy? Yes, sweetheart. An adventure. Now, in Joanna's kitchen, Brent spread out everything they had. The flash drive contents printed across the table. The bottle of fake vitamins in an evidence bag. Medical records from Dr. Cuevas showing Emma's declining health. Bank statements showing the forged insurance policy. It should be enough. But Brent knew the system. Whitney was beautiful, charming, and convincing. Douglas Gentry would have alibis, explanations. A good lawyer could create reasonable doubt, claim the emails were taken out of context, suggest Brent was the actual poisoner trying to frame his wife. You're overthinking this, Joanna said, pouring coffee. The evidence is clear. Is it? They'll say I had access to all these drugs. I'm the pharmacist. I could have filled that bottle myself and planted evidence on Whitney's computer. He ran his hands through his hair. They researched framing me, Joe. They have a counterplan. His phone buzzed. 16 missed calls from Whitney. 5 from Hassan. 3 from Douglas Gentry's number. Not that Brent knew who he was officially yet. A text from Whitney. Where is Emma? What have you done? I'm calling the police. Let her call, Joanna said. The truth is on your side. But Brent's mind was already 3 steps ahead. Whitney would cry, play the worried mother, claim Brent had a breakdown and kidnapped their daughter. She'd have witnesses, Hassan, her friends. She'd crafted a narrative. He opened his laptop and started digging into Douglas Gentry's background. Former pharmaceutical sales executive, currently consultant for medical insurance companies. Divorced twice. Current address in Scottsdale. Several LLC companies registered under his name. One company caught Brent's attention, Gentry Medical Consulting. He clicked deeper. The LLC had received payments from multiple insurance companies over the past 3 years. Large payments. Consulting fees for what? A darker pattern emerged. Brent cross-referenced death certificates in Arizona with Gentry's company payments. Of the 32 clients that Gentry had consulted for in the past 3 years, 11 had children who died within 6 months of the consultation. All ruled natural causes. All with life insurance policies. Oh my God, Brent whispered. This isn't Whitney's first rodeo. It's his. Joanna looked over his shoulder. What are you saying? I'm saying Douglas Gentry is a professional. He helps people murder their children for insurance money, makes it look natural, and takes a cut. Whitney's not the mastermind. She's his latest client. The realization made Brent's stomach turn. Emma wasn't just a victim of her mother's greed. She was a mark in a serial killer's business model. Then we go to the FBI, Joanna said firmly. This is bigger than local police. And say what? I have suspicions based on public records and correlation. They'll investigate, eventually. But how long will that take? Months? A year? Brent shook his head. Meanwhile, Gentry and Whitney lawyer up, destroy evidence, and maybe walk. So what's your plan? Brent stared at the evidence spread before him. The pharmacist in him saw it clearly, the diagnosis, the treatment, the cure. Douglas Gentry had poisoned 11 children, possibly more. Whitney had poisoned Emma. They'd researched exactly how to do it, how to get away with it. They'd studied poison. It was time for them to taste it. I'm going to give them exactly what they tried to give Emma, Brent said slowly. But I'm not going to kill them. I'm going to trap them in their own lie, make them confess to everything, and ensure they can't escape. How? Brent smiled, but there was no warmth in it. By making them think they've won, and then turning their own plan against them. He pulled up Whitney's email again, reading the correspondence with clinical detachment. They'd planned to frame him. They had a whole strategy, plant evidence, create witnesses, build a narrative of an unstable husband who'd poisoned his own daughter. If they want to frame me, Brent said, I'll let them try. But I'll control every piece of evidence they think they're planting. And when they reveal their plan, they'll be confessing to their own crimes. Joanna frowned. That's risky. What if it backfires? It won't, because I'm going to have backup the whole time, federal backup. I just need them to commit to the frame-up on record. He pulled out his phone. First, I call my lawyer. Then I contact the FBI with what we have on Gentry. Then I set the trap. And Whitney. Whitney is going to think she still has the upper hand. She'll think Emma is coming home, that I'm backing down, that her plan is working. His voice hardened. And when she and Gentry try to finish what they started, I'll be recording every second. Over the next 3 days, Brent became someone he barely recognized. The careful, methodical pharmacist transformed into a strategist. He met with his lawyer, Marcus Webb, who immediately got a protective order for Emma. He contacted the FBI with his evidence on Douglas Gentry, triggering an investigation. He hired a private investigator to document Whitney and Gentry's movements. But he also did something more dangerous. He called Whitney. Brent, thank God, she answered, voice dripping with false relief. Where's Emma? Is she okay? She's safe. And I know what you did. Silence. Then, I don't know what you're talking about. The vitamins, Whitney. I had them analyzed. Ambien, acetaminophen, antihistamines. You've been poisoning our daughter. That's insane. Those are vitamins. If there's something wrong with them, maybe you should look at the pharmacy where you work. Didn't you bring home those bottles? The counter-accusation. Right on schedule. Did I also write those emails to Douglas Gentry? Plan the insurance fraud? Research how to poison children? Her breathing changed. Fear or calculation He couldn't tell. You hacked my computer. That's illegal. Nothing you found is admissible. Maybe not in court, but it's admissible to Child Protective Services, to Emma's doctors, to everyone who needs to know you're a danger to our daughter. If you accuse me publicly, I'll destroy you. Douglas has connections. We'll prove you're the one who poisoned Emma, had a breakdown, and tried to frame me. Hassan will testify you had access to all those drugs. Your own colleague. There it was. Hassan was their inside man, their witness. Probably paid off or coerced. Why? Brent asked quietly. Why Emma? Why our daughter? Whitney's voice turned cold. Because I'm done being broke while you slave away at a pharmacy, making pennies. Because Douglas showed me how easy it is. Because Emma was always more yours than mine anyway. The admission was chilling in its honesty. No remorse. No maternal grief. Just cold financial calculation. You won't get away with this, Brent said. I already have. You can't prove anything without evidence that's inadmissible. And when Emma comes back home, and she will, the courts always favor mothers. I'll finish what I started. Maybe more carefully this time. Maybe with your help, since you'll be in jail for her murder. She hung up. Brent stared at his phone, Whitney's words echoing. Then he pressed stop on the recording app. Got it, he said to Marcus Webb, who sat across from him. Full confession, threats, admission of intent to continue harming Emma. Marcus smiled grimly. That'll play nicely for the FBI, but you know she'll claim coercion, say you manipulated her. That's why this is just step one. Brent pulled up a new email draft, addressed to Douglas Gentry from a burner account. Step 2 is making them think I'm broken, that they've won. And step 3 is the trap, Marcus finished. Is the trap, Brent agreed. He typed carefully, crafting a message that would read like desperation. Mr. Gentry, I know who you are and what you do. I have evidence against Whitney, but you're right. I can't use it without implicating myself. I want to make a deal. You leave Emma alone, I give you the evidence to destroy, and we all walk away. If you don't agree, I'm going to the FBI with everything, including your other clients. Meet me to discuss terms. He hit send. 20 minutes later, a response came. Midnight. Desert Ridge parking lot. Come alone. Brent showed the email to Marcus. Think he'll actually show? He's arrogant enough. Men like Gentry think they're smarter than everyone else. Marcus leaned back. But you're not actually going alone, right? Of course not. I'll have the FBI, my investigator, and you on standby. Plus, Brent pulled out a small device, audio-video recording equipment, provided by my investigator friend. And if Gentry doesn't confess, if he's smart enough to keep quiet, Brent's smile turned predatory. Then I activate Plan B. But something tells me Douglas Gentry likes to gloat. He's been getting away with this for years. He'll want to brag, explain how clever he is. They always do. The trap was set. Now, they just had to spring it. Chapter 5, The Meeting. The Desert Ridge parking lot was nearly empty at midnight. Brent sat in his car, watching shadows move between street lamps. His heart hammered against his ribs, but his hands were steady on the wheel. A black BMW pulled up 3 spaces away. Douglas Gentry stepped out, mid-40s, expensive suit, the kind of practice smile that probably worked on desperate people. He was handsome in a slick way, with graying temples and cold blue eyes. Brent activated his recording devices, one in his shirt pocket, one in his watch, one in the car's dash cam. Redundancy was everything. He stepped out of his car. Mr. Ramirez. Gentry's voice was smooth. I appreciate you being reasonable about this situation. Situation? Brent kept his voice level. You mean the attempted murder of my daughter? Gentry chuckled. Such dramatic language. Whitney was simply administering supplements that didn't agree with your daughter's system. Tragic miscommunication between spouses. Miscommunication, right? Like those emails planning her death were miscommunication. Emails that you obtained illegally. Gentry stepped closer. You're a smart man, Brent. You understand that your evidence is worthless. Hacked computers, stolen files. Inadmissible. But what is admissible is your access to all those drugs. Your prints on that bottle. Your colleague Hassan's testimony that you've been stressed, unstable, talking about financial problems. Hassan's lying. Is he? Or is he just a concerned co-worker who noticed warning signs. Gentry's smile widened. The narrative is already built. Struggling pharmacist, strained marriage, underwater financially. Decides to kill his daughter for insurance money, but has a crisis of conscience at the last moment. Tries to blame his innocent wife. It's textbook, except it's not true. Truth is malleable in court, Mr. Ramirez. I made a career of demonstrating that. Gentry pulled out his phone, scrolling. I've helped 12 families resolve their financial difficulties through unfortunate childhood illnesses. All natural causes. All careful. Whitney was actually my sloppiest client. She got emotionally involved with me, which complicated things. But even sloppy, we're still going to win. 12 families, Brent repeated, making sure the recording caught it. 12 dead children. I prefer to think of them as solutions to complex financial problems. Gentry was enjoying this, showing off. You'd be amazed how many parents are drowning in debt, one tragedy away from freedom. I simply facilitate that tragedy. For a reasonable fee, of course. You're a serial killer. I'm a consultant. Gentry stepped closer, his breath visible in the cold night air. And you, Mr. Ramirez, are going to give me that flash drive with Whitney's emails, delete any copies you have, and sign a statement admitting you poisoned Emma in a moment of financial desperation. In exchange, Whitney will provide testimony that you're a good father who made a terrible mistake, and we'll recommend reduced charges. You to maybe 5 years, out in 3. And if I refuse, then Emma disappears while in your care, her body shows up with lethal doses of drugs you had access to, and you spend life in prison for murder. Whitney plays the grieving mother, collects the insurance money, and moves on with her life. With me, the casual way he described murdering Emma made Brent's vision blur with rage. But he forced himself to stay calm, to let Gentry talk. Why are you telling me this? Brent asked. Why not just kill me too? Because you're useful as a patsy. Dead, you're a victim and police investigate. Alive and convicted, you're a solved case. Much cleaner. Gentry checked his watch. So do we have a deal? Just so I'm clear, Brent said slowly. You're admitting you helped 12 people murder their children for insurance money. You're admitting you plan to kill Emma if I don't confess to attempted murder. And you think you're going to get away with it. I know I'm going to get away with it. Because I'm smarter than you, more connected than you, and I've done this successfully for 3 years. Gentry's smile was pure arrogance. Men like you, good men, family men, you think the system will save you. You think evidence and truth matter. They don't. Money matters. Connections matter. I have both. You're right about one thing, Brent said. I'm a good man, which is why I'm not going to let you hurt my daughter. You don't have a choice. The parking lot flooded with light. 6 FBI vehicles surrounded them, sirens wailing. Agents poured out, weapons drawn. Douglas Gentry, FBI, get on the ground. Gentry's face transformed from smugness to panic in seconds. He spun, looking for escape, but agents already had him surrounded. What the? You wore a wire. 3 wires, actually. Brent pulled out his phone, showing the live stream to the FBI. They've been listening to every word. Your 12 murders. Your plan to kill Emma. Your entire confession. Special Agent Marissa Ochoa approached, flashing her badge. Mr. Gentry, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, 12 counts of suspected murder, insurance fraud, and quite frankly, being stupid enough to confess to a federal crime while being recorded. As agents wrestled Gentry to the ground, his eyes locked on Brent. Whitney will still walk. You can't prove she did anything without my testimony. Don't need your testimony, Brent said coldly. She called me 3 hours ago with her own confession. I recorded that too. And right about now, agents are arresting her at her friend Brianna Stevenson's house, where she's been hiding since I took Emma. Gentry thrashed against the handcuffs. You set us up. You set this whole thing up. I'm a pharmacist, Brent said quietly. I understand dosage, treatment, cure. You poisoned my daughter, tried to frame me, and thought you were smarter than everyone. I just gave you enough rope to hang yourself. Agent Ochoa nodded at Brent. We'll need your full statement, but preliminary, you did good work here. That recording is going to put both of them away for decades. What about Hassan? He was going to lie for them. already in custody. Turns out he accepted a $50,000 bribe to provide false testimony. That's obstruction of justice. He's facing charges too. As they led Gentry away, still screaming about lawyers and rights, Brent felt the adrenaline drain from his body. It wasn't over. There would be trials, testimonies, media attention. But the immediate threat was gone. His phone rang. "Joanna, Emma's asking for you." "Did it work?" "It worked. They're both under arrest. It's over. Thank God. When are you coming back?" "Soon. I just need to—" He paused, watching the BMW being towed away as evidence. "I need to see where Hassan lives." "Brent, no. The FBI has him." "I know. I just want to talk to him." 15 minutes. Agent Ochoa was watching him. Brent met her eyes, and she gave a small nod. She understood. Some things needed to be said. "One conversation," she said quietly. "Supervised." 15 minutes. They drove to Hassan's apartment in separate cars. The FBI had already searched it, found the bank deposits from Gentry, found emails confirming Hassan's betrayal. He sat on his couch, head in his hands, while two agents stood guard. "Hassan," Brent said. His colleague looked up, shame and fear mixing on his face. Hassan Lynch had worked with Brent for 7 years. They'd shared shifts, covered for each other, talked about their families. "Brent, I swear I didn't know they were going to hurt Emma. They told me it was just marriage trouble, that Whitney needed someone to confirm you were stressed. For $50,000. Brent's voice was flat. "You were willing to lie under oath and send me to prison for $50,000. I have debt, man. Gambling debt. I was desperate. I was desperate too when my daughter was being poisoned. I didn't betray my friends." Hassan stood, took a step forward. Agents tensed, but Hassan just held out his hands, pleading. "What do you want me to say? I fucked up. I'm sorry. If I could take it back." "You can't. Emma almost died because you were willing to lie for money." Brent stepped closer. "You worked in a pharmacy, Hassan. You knew the oath we took. First, do no harm. I didn't harm anyone. You were going to help frame an innocent man for attempted murder. That's harm." Brent's voice stayed calm, controlled. "The only reason you're not an accessory to attempted murder is because I stopped them before they finished." Hassan's face crumpled. "What happens now?" "Now you spend the next few years in federal prison for obstruction of justice. You lose your pharmacy license. You lose your career. And you live with the knowledge that you almost helped kill an 8-year-old girl for money you've already spent on cards and horses." Agent Ochoa touched Brent's shoulder. "Time's up." As they led Hassan away, the former friend called back. "I really am sorry, Brent." Brent didn't answer. Some apologies meant nothing. Some betrayals couldn't be forgiven. He drove back to Joanna's apartment as dawn painted the sky orange and pink. Inside, Emma was awake, eating pancakes with her aunt. She looked pale, but healthier than she had in weeks. "Daddy!" She jumped into his arms. "Aunt Joe says we're having a longer adventure." "Is that true?" "Yes, sweetheart. A longer adventure. Just you and me for a while." "Where's Mommy?" Brent's chest tightened. That conversation would come later, carefully, with child psychologists and support. "For now, Mommy's away. But you're safe. I promise you're safe." Emma studied his face with those two wise eyes. "Am I going to get sick again?" "Never. Those vitamins are gone. You're going to get better every day." She hugged him tighter. "Good. I was scared, Daddy." "I know, baby. I know." Joanna mouthed over Emma's head. "What now?" Brent looked at his daughter, then at his sister, then out the window at the rising sun. "Now we heal," he said quietly, "and we make sure they can never hurt anyone else again." Chapter 6. The Aftermath. The trial of Whitney Ramirez and Douglas Gentry became national news. The vitamin murderers, the media called them, splashing their photos across every outlet. Brent refused most interview requests, focusing instead on Emma's recovery and preparing his testimony. Dr. Burton Cuevas provided expert testimony on Emma's medical condition, how the random cocktail of adult medications had systematically destroyed her health, how much longer she might have survived if Brent hadn't discovered the truth. The jury sat in stunned silence as he described the calculated cruelty of slowly poisoning a child. Brent testified on day 4. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, court watchers, victims' families from Gentry's other cases who'd finally gotten answers about their own lost children. Mr. Ramirez, the prosecutor asked, "When did you first suspect something was wrong?" "My daughter complained of headaches. They got worse, not better. As a pharmacist, I knew persistent symptoms required investigation." Brent kept his voice steady, professional. "What I found was a systematic attempt to kill my child for insurance money." The defense attorney, a sharp woman named Gloria Kent, tried to shake his testimony. "Isn't it true, Mr. Ramirez, that you had access to all the medications found in the vitamin bottle? That you could have planted them there yourself?" "I could have," Brent agreed, "but I didn't. The browser history on my wife's computer, the emails with Mr. Gentry, the recorded confessions, they all prove who actually poisoned Emma." Recorded confessions obtained through deception. Obtained through giving guilty people enough rope to hang themselves, Brent interrupted. "My wife admitted she'd been poisoning our daughter. Mr. Gentry confessed to 12 other similar murders. Those facts don't change regardless of how the recordings were obtained." Whitney sat at the defense table, her beauty dulled by prison jumpsuits and stress. She tried to claim coercion, mental illness, manipulation by Gentry. But the jury had heard her voice on those recordings, cold, calculating, expressing no remorse. When Whitney took the stand, she cried convincingly. "I was depressed. Douglas took advantage of me. He manipulated me into believing this was the only way out of our debt. I never meant to actually hurt Emma." The prosecutor played the recording. "I'll finish what I started. Maybe more carefully this time." Whitney had no answer for her own voice. Douglas Gentry's defense was even weaker. His lawyers tried to claim the FBI had conducted an illegal sting operation, that Brent had entrapped him. But the recording was clear. Gentry bragging about 12 murders, threatening Emma's life, confessing to a serial pattern of killing children for money. The FBI had exhumed bodies from 8 of his previous cases. Toxicology reports found similar drug cocktails in 6 of them. The evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. Brent sat in the courtroom as the verdicts were read, one after another. Conspiracy to commit murder. Attempted murder. Child abuse. Insurance fraud. For Whitney and Gentry both, the charges stacked up like gravestones for the children they'd harmed. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, addressed them both. "In my 30 years on the bench, I have never seen such calculated, cold-blooded evil. You didn't kill in passion or desperation. You killed slowly, methodically, making children suffer for money. You are predators of the worst kind." She sentenced Douglas Gentry to life without parole on multiple murder charges. Whitney received 45 years for attempted murder and conspiracy. As guards led them away, Whitney turned back once, her eyes finding Brent. She mouthed something he couldn't quite read. Maybe sorry. Maybe damn you. It didn't matter anymore. Outside the courthouse, victims' families approached Brent. Parents who'd lost children to mysterious illnesses, who'd blamed themselves for years, who'd finally gotten answers. "Thank you," a woman named Margaret whispered, tears streaming. "My son Tyler. We thought it was just bad luck. We never knew Gentry had consulted with my ex-husband right before Tyler got sick. You gave us the truth. 8 families. 8 children who'd been murdered by Gentry's schemes. 8 families who'd finally gotten justice because Brent had been smart enough, careful enough, to trap a serial killer. But Brent couldn't celebrate. He thought of the 3 other children whose bodies hadn't provided evidence, whose deaths might have been natural. He thought of the families who'd never know for certain. "Dad!" Emma's voice cut through his thoughts. She ran to him, now healthy and pink-cheeked, her headaches gone. 3 months of recovery had transformed her back into the energetic child she'd been before Whitney's poison. "Hey, sweetheart. Thought Aunt Jo was going to keep you at the park. We wanted to be here when it was over." Joanna approached, her hand on Emma's shoulder. "How are you feeling?" "Tired. Relieved." Brent picked up Emma, holding her close, ready to go home. Home was a new apartment on the other side of Phoenix, away from the house where Whitney had poisoned their daughter. Brent had sold everything, started fresh. The pharmacy had welcomed him back, though he'd requested fewer hours to spend more time with Emma. Some things were more important than money. As they drove home, Emma chattered about her day at the park, about school starting soon, about normal childhood concerns. The trauma therapist said she was doing remarkably well, all things considered. Children were resilient. But sometimes Brent caught her staring at pill bottles with distrust. Sometimes she had nightmares about feeling sick. The scars were invisible but real. That night, after Emma fell asleep, Brent sat on his balcony with Joanna. They shared a beer in comfortable silence, watching the city lights. "You did good," Joanna said quietly. "You saved her. You stopped a serial killer. You got justice." "I almost didn't," Brent admitted. "If I'd trusted Whitney, if I hadn't checked that bottle, if I'd waited even a few more days. But you didn't. You trusted your instincts. You were smart and careful and brave." Brent took a long drink. "Hassan got 10 years. He's appealing. Fuck Hassan. He chose money over a child's life. I keep thinking about the parents who hired Gentry. Not Whitney. She was gone the moment she agreed to hurt Emma. But the others, were they all monsters? Or just desperate people who made evil choices? Does it matter? They killed their own children, Brent. There's no justifying that." He nodded, but the question haunted him. The nature of evil, the choices people made. Whitney hadn't started as a monster. She'd been a woman he loved, who'd loved Emma once. Somewhere along the way, greed had poisoned her more thoroughly than any drug. His phone buzzed. A text from Marcus Webb. Appeal filed by Whitney's defense. "Don't worry, it'll be denied. You did everything right." Everything right. Brent thought about his choices. The recordings, the trap, the calculated way he'd manipulated Gentry and Whitney into confessing. Some of his methods had been legally gray, ethically questionable, but Emma was alive, and 12 other children finally had justice. "No regrets?" Joanna asked, reading his expression. "Some. I wish I'd figured it out sooner. I wish Emma hadn't suffered at all." He paused. "But regrets about how I stopped them? No. They deserved everything they got. That's my brother." Joanna clinked her beer against his. "The badass who took down a serial killer." Brent smiled despite himself. "I'm not a badass. I'm a pharmacist who got really angry." Same thing, apparently. They sat in comfortable silence until Joanna headed home. Brent checked on Emma one last time, watching her sleep peacefully. No headaches, no poison, just dreams of childhood adventures. He'd protected his daughter. He'd stopped monsters. He'd earned this peace. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Emma's therapy, the ongoing legal appeals, rebuilding their life. But tonight, in this moment, they were safe. The pharmacist had prescribed the perfect dose of justice. And some medicines Brent thought tasted bitter going down. But they cured the disease. Chapter 7. The Appeal. 6 months later, Brent stood in his pharmacy, counting pills with the same methodical precision he'd always used. But now, every bottle made him pause. Every prescription made him double-check. The trauma of what Whitney had done lived in his hands. Brent, his new colleague, a young woman named Molly Glass, touched his arm. "You okay? You've counted that bottle 3 times." "Sorry. Just careful." Molly nodded with understanding. Everyone at the pharmacy knew his story. They'd seen the news, the trial, the aftermath. Some treated him like a hero. Others looked at him with pity. Both reactions felt wrong. His phone rang. Marcus Webb. "Brent, we have a problem." His stomach dropped. Those words never meant anything good. "What kind of problem?" "Whitney's appeal is gaining traction. Her new lawyer filed a brief arguing that Douglas Gentry coerced her, that she's a victim of psychological manipulation. They're calling it battered person syndrome, even though there's no evidence Gentry abused her. That's bullshit. The recordings are being challenged as inadmissible under a new interpretation of consent laws. It's a long shot, but Judge Morrison is known for being sympathetic to women defendants." Marcus sighed. "There's a hearing next week. The appeals court wants to review the case." Brent's hand clenched around the phone. "They can't let her out. She tried to kill Emma." "I know, but the legal system has loopholes." Her lawyer, Richard Pembroke, is one of the best appellate attorneys in the state. He's making this about mental health, coercion, and technically, Whitney never actually poisoned Emma with her own hands. She just gave her the pills. That's semantic nonsense. That's the law. Look, we're going to fight this. The prosecutor is prepared. But you need to be ready for the possibility that Whitney might get a reduced sentence or even a new trial. After hanging up, Brent stood frozen in the pharmacy's fluorescent light. The idea of Whitney walking free, of Emma having to face her mother again, of the justice they'd won slipping away. It was unbearable. Bad news, Molly asked gently. Whitney's appeal. Her lawyers are trying to get her sentence reduced. Can they do that? After everything she did? Apparently they can try. Brent pulled off his pharmacy coat. Cover for me? I need to make some calls. He drove to the park where Joanna was watching Emma play. His daughter had flourished in the past 6 months, back to her normal weight, excelling in school, smiling again. She was on the swings, laughing with friends. What's wrong? Joanna asked, reading his face. He explained the appeal, the legal maneuvering, the possibility of Whitney getting out. That's insane. She confessed. Confessions obtained through deception might not be admissible, according to her new lawyer. They're arguing I entrapped her into saying things she didn't mean. You got to be kidding me. I wish I was. Brent watched Emma swing higher, her dark hair flying. I can't let her win, Joe. I can't let Emma think that monsters get away with it if they're charming enough, if they hire good enough lawyers. So what are you going to do? Brent was quiet for a long moment. Something I should have done from the beginning. I'm going to make absolutely certain there's no way for Whitney or her lawyer to twist the truth. Meaning what? Meaning I'm going to find evidence, even they can't dispute. Something that proves Whitney's guilt so completely, so absolutely, that no appeals court can ignore it. Brent, the trial is over. You can't just manufacture new evidence. I'm not manufacturing anything. I'm finding what was always there. Whitney was methodical, calculating. She didn't just poison Emma on a whim. She planned it for months. There has to be more evidence, receipts, communications, something that proves premeditation beyond any doubt. Joanna studied him. You're going to investigate your own case. I'm going to finish what I started. Because if Whitney gets out, even on reduced charges, she'll come after Emma again. People like her don't stop. They just get more careful. That night, after Emma was asleep, Brent returned to the house he'd once shared with Whitney. It sat empty, listed for sale, a monument to a broken family. He'd avoided it for months, letting realtors handle the showings, unable to face the place where his wife had poisoned their child. But now he searched with purpose. The police had taken Whitney's computer, her phone, obvious evidence. But Brent knew his wife. She was paranoid about digital trails. She would have kept physical records too. He started in her office, pulling books from shelves, checking for hidden compartments. Nothing. He moved to the bedroom, searching through drawers that still held her clothes, smelling faintly of her perfume. In the back of her closet, behind a box of old photo albums, he found it. A locked metal box he'd never seen before. Small enough to hide, heavy enough to contain something important. He broke the lock with a hammer, heart pounding. Inside, journals. 3 of them, filled with Whitney's handwriting. Brent opened the first one, dated 2 years ago. Douglas showed me how easy it would be. Insurance policies pay so much for childhood deaths. Brent would be devastated, of course, but he'd get over it. I'd finally be free from this life, from playing mother to a child I never really wanted. Sometimes I look at Emma and feel nothing. Is that normal? His hand shook as he read further. Research suggests mixing adult medications slowly causes organ failure that mimics natural disease. Acetaminophen for liver damage, sleeping pills for neurological issues. Doctor won't suspect abuse if it's gradual. Met with Douglas today. He's charming, so different from Brent. He understands ambition. Brent's content to count pills forever, but I want more. The life insurance policy on Emma is $500,000. Douglas takes 30%. That leaves me $350,000 to start over. Forge Brent's signature on the policy today. So easy. He never pays attention to the mail anyway. Started the vitamins yesterday. Emma complained they tasted weird, but she took them. Good girl. This will take months, but Douglas says slow is safer. Entry after entry, documenting her premeditation, her complete lack of remorse, her calculations about Emma's declining health. It was a roadmap of child murder, written in Whitney's own hand. The final entry was dated 3 days before Brent discovered the truth. Emma's getting sicker faster than expected. Doctor wants to hospitalize her. Douglas says that's perfect. Natural causes will be easier to prove if she dies in hospital care. I almost feel bad when she cries, but then I think about the money and everything I can do with my new life. Brent suspects nothing. He's too trusting. Always has been. Brent closed the journal, ball rising in his throat. This was worse than he'd imagined. Whitney hadn't been manipulated by Gentry. She'd been an eager, willing participant, maybe even the instigator. He photographed every page, then called Marcus Webb. I found something. Journals. Whitney documented everything. The planning, the execution, her complete awareness and intent. Journals? Where? Hidden in our old house. I'm photographing everything now. This proves premeditation beyond any doubt. No appeal lawyer can claim coercion when she wrote, "I almost feel bad when she cries about her dying daughter." Marcus was quiet. "Brent, I need to ask, did you plant these journals?" "What?" "No. Why would you?" "Because if Whitney's lawyer can suggest you manufactured evidence to support your case, it could backfire. You can't just find new evidence months after the trial without it looking suspicious. I didn't manufacture anything. These are real. Her handwriting, her thoughts, dated entries that match Emma's medical timeline. Then we need to get them authenticated immediately. Handwriting expert, forensic dating of the paper and ink, everything. And we need to explain why you didn't find them earlier. I avoided the house. I couldn't face it. Only came back tonight because of the appeal. That's the truth. That's the truth." Marcus exhaled. "Okay, bring me everything tomorrow. I'll get experts on it. If these journals are authentic, and we can prove it, they'll shut down Whitney's appeal permanently." Brent gathered the journals carefully, preserving them like the evidence they were. As he left the house for what he hoped was the last time, he thought about Whitney's words. Brent's too trusting. Always has been. She'd been wrong. He'd been trusting. Past tense. Now he was just determined. Chapter 8. The Final Verdict. The appeals hearing was scheduled for a Monday morning in October. Brent sat in the courtroom's front row, Marcus Webb beside him, the authenticated journals now part of the official record. The handwriting experts had confirmed. Every entry was written by Whitney Ramirez. The ink and paper dated correctly to the timeline she described. The content matched Emma's medical records with perfect accuracy. There was no possibility of forgery or manipulation. Whitney's lawyer, Richard Pembroke, was a silver-haired man with an expensive suit and tired eyes. He tried to challenge the journal's admissibility, claiming they were obtained illegally from private property. Judge Morrison, a stern woman with glasses and no patience for games, had shut that down immediately. Mr. Ramirez owned the house jointly. He had every legal right to search it. The journals are admissible. Now, Pembroke stood before the 3-judge appellate panel, making his final argument for why Whitney deserved a reduced sentence. "Your Honors, my client was a victim of psychological manipulation by Douglas Gentry, a known predator who targeted vulnerable women. While Ms. Ramirez's actions were reprehensible, they occurred under duress and coercion. The original sentence of 45 years fails to account for her diminished capacity." "Mr. Pembroke," Judge Morrison interrupted, "have you read the journals Mr. Ramirez submitted?" "I have, Your Honor, but I question their authenticity. They've been authenticated by 3 separate experts, and they paint a picture of a woman who is fully aware of her actions, calculating in her methodology, and completely unremorseful about slowly poisoning her 8-year-old daughter for money." Morrison's voice was ice. "Where, exactly, is the coercion? Douglas Gentry influenced her thinking. She wrote, and I quote, 'I look at Emma and feel nothing.' Is that normal?" "That's not coercion, Mr. Pembroke. That is sociopath documenting her own lack of empathy." The other judges nodded. The lead appellate judge, a man named Vincent Torres, leaned forward. "Mr. Pembroke, your client wrote detailed plans to murder her child. She researched exactly how to do it. She forged insurance documents. She documented her victims' suffering and expressed anticipation for the payout. What possible argument justifies reducing her sentence? Pembroke tried several more angles: mental health, battered person syndrome, Gentry's manipulation. But each argument crumbled against Whitney's own written words. Finally, Judge Torres spoke. "We've reviewed the case thoroughly. The original conviction was sound. The evidence is overwhelming. The journals submitted by Mr. Ramirez only further confirm what the trial established. Whitney Ramirez deliberately, methodically, and remorselessly attempted to murder her daughter for financial gain. There is no basis for appeal. The original sentence of 45 years is affirmed." The gavel struck. Brent closed his eyes, relief flooding through him. Additionally, Judge Morrison added, "We are recommending that Ms. Ramirez never be granted parole. The nature of her crime, the complete lack of remorse, and the continued danger she poses to her daughter and society make her rehabilitation unlikely. This court recommends she serve her full sentence without possibility of early release." Whitney, sitting between guards at the defense table, finally showed emotion. Her face crumpled, tears streaming. No, you can't do this. I'm a mother. I deserve a second chance." "You poisoned your child," Morrison said coldly. "You documented your enjoyment of her suffering. You planned her death for money. You don't get second chances, Ms. Ramirez. You get consequences." As guards led Whitney away, she screamed at Brent, "You did this. You ruined everything. Emma was my daughter." "No," Brent said quietly, standing. "Emma is my daughter, and she's alive despite you." Whitney's screams echoed down the hallway until doors closed, muffling her rage. Outside the courthouse, Brent faced a small gathering of press. He'd avoided media for months, but Marcus had suggested he make a statement. Some closure, some final word. "Mr. Ramirez," a reporter called, "how does it feel to know your wife will spend her life in prison?" "It feels like justice," Brent said simply. "My wife tried to kill our daughter for money. She planned it, executed it, and showed no remorse. The sentence she received is appropriate." What about Douglas Gentry? His appeal was also denied this week. Good. Gentry murdered at least 8 children and attempted to murder more. He's a serial killer who found a legal way to profit from child deaths. He should never see freedom again. What message do you have for other parents who might be in similar situations? Brent paused, choosing words carefully. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong with your child's care, investigate. Don't assume doctors have all the answers. Don't trust blindly. And if you discover someone is harming your child, document everything, gather evidence, and protect your child first. Justice can come later, but safety is immediate. One more question. Do you consider yourself a hero? No. I'm a father who protected his daughter. That's not heroism. That's the basic requirement of being a parent. He glanced at Joanna, who stood nearby with Emma. The real heroes are the people who supported us. My sister, Dr. Cuevas, the FBI agents who believed me, the prosecutors who fought for justice. I just did what any parent should do. As they drove back to their apartment, Emma chatted about school from the back seat, blissfully unaware of the morning's legal victory. She knew her mother was in jail for hurting people, but Brent had shielded her from the full horror. That knowledge would come later, when she was older, with the help of therapists and time. "Dad," Emma asked, as they pulled into the parking lot, "can we get ice cream? You promised if you won in court." "I did promise. How about we call Aunt Jo and make it a celebration?" "Yes. Can I get cookie dough?" "You can get whatever you want, sweetheart." At the ice cream shop, Brent watched his daughter laugh with Joanna, chocolate already smeared on her chin. She was healthy, happy, safe. The opposite of the pale, sick child Whitney had been systematically destroying. His phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Cuevas. Heard the news. Justice served. "How's Emma?" "Perfect," Brent typed back. "Eating ice cream and being a kid. That's the best medicine." "Good work, Brent. You saved her life." Had he just corrected a situation he should have prevented? The guilt still lingered. The months he'd trusted Whitney, the signs he'd missed, the time Emma had suffered while he remained oblivious. "Stop it," Joanna said quietly, reading his expression. "I can see you spiraling. You did everything right. You caught it, stopped it, and got justice. Emma is alive because of you. She almost died because I was blind. You were trusting your wife. That's normal. What's not normal is Whitney being a psychopathic killer. You can't blame yourself for not predicting the unpredictable. Brent nodded, but the weight remained. Maybe it always would. That evening, after Emma was asleep, Brent received an unexpected visitor. Hassan Lynch stood at his door, thinner than Brent remembered, with the haunted look of someone who'd spent time in federal prison. "I know I'm the last person you want to see," Hassan said before Brent could speak. "But I'm out on supervised release, and part of my parole is making amends. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry. What I did was unforgivable. I chose money over a child's life, over our friendship. I've had 2 years to think about that, and it eats me alive every day." Brent stared at his former colleague. "Why are you really here, Hassan?" "Because you deserve to hear it from me, not from lawyers or courts. I betrayed you. I was willing to lie and send you to prison so I could pay off gambling debts. Emma could have died because I didn't do the right thing." Hassan's voice cracked. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I know. And I'm sorry." Okay. You said what you came to say. I heard it. Now leave." Hassan nodded, turned to go, then paused. "For what it's worth, what you did, stopping Whitney and Gentry, saving Emma, that took real courage. You're a good man, Brent. I wish I'd been more like you." After Hassan left, Brent stood in his doorway for a long time. Some apologies couldn't fix what was broken. Some betrayals left permanent scars. But Emma was safe. Whitney was in prison forever. Gentry would die behind bars. The system, flawed as it was, had worked this time. Justice, Brent thought, tasted bitter and sweet all at once. Like the best medicine. Chapter 9. The Cure. 1 year later, Brent stood in a new pharmacy, his own. The shop was small but well-stocked, located in a quiet neighborhood where people knew his story but respected his privacy. The sign above the door read, "Ramirez Family Pharmacy." Emma had helped design the logo, a mortar and pestle surrounded by flowers. She'd insisted on the flowers. Grand opening. Molly Glass called from the front counter, where a small crowd had gathered. Neighbors, former colleagues, even Dr. Burton Cuevas had come to support Brent's new venture. After everything that had happened, Brent had decided to leave his old pharmacy job and start fresh. This place was his. No memories of Whitney, no associations with Hassan's betrayal. Just clean counters, organized shelves, and the opportunity to help people. "Thank you all for coming," Brent addressed the crowd. "This pharmacy represents a new chapter for my family. A place built on trust, care, and doing what's right. Every prescription filled here will be checked twice, every patient treated with respect, and every child protected." The crowd applauded. Emma beamed from beside Joanna, wearing a special junior pharmacist name tag Brent had made for her. As the morning progressed, Brent filled prescriptions, counseled patients, and felt something he hadn't experienced in over a year: peace. This was his purpose, helping people, using his knowledge for good, making sure medications healed instead of harmed. "Mr. Ramirez?" A woman approached the counter, nervous. "I'm Margaret Reynolds. My son, Tyler. He was one of Douglas Gentry's victims." Brent remembered the name. Tyler Reynolds, age 7, died of natural causes 3 years ago. Gentry's consultation with the mother's ex-husband had occurred 2 months before Tyler's death. "Mrs. Reynolds, I'm so sorry for your loss. I wanted to thank you. Before you caught Gentry, I thought Tyler's death was my fault, that I'd missed signs of illness, that I'd been a bad mother. But it wasn't illness. It was murder. And knowing that, it doesn't bring him back, but it gives me peace. I wasn't a bad mother. I was a victim of a monster." Her voice broke. "You gave me that gift. You gave all the families that gift. So thank you." Brent didn't know what to say. He'd been so focused on saving Emma, on getting justice, that he hadn't fully considered the other families affected by Gentry's crimes. "Tyler deserved better," he finally said. "All those children did. I just wish I'd stopped Gentry sooner." "You stopped him when you could. That's all any of us can do." She squeezed his hand. "I hope you and Emma have beautiful lives. You both earned it." As the day wound down and customers filtered out, Brent locked the door and turned off the lights. Emma sat in his office, coloring while he finished paperwork. "Dad," she asked, not looking up from her drawing, "are you happy now?" The question surprised him. "What do you mean, sweetheart? You seemed sad for a long time, even when you smiled. But today you seem really happy." Kids noticed everything. Brent set down his pen and pulled Emma into his lap. "I am happy because we're safe. We have this new pharmacy and you're healthy. That's everything I wanted. I don't remember much about being sick," Emma admitted. "Just that my head hurt and I was tired all the time. And Mommy gave me vitamins." This was the moment. The therapist had said Emma would eventually ask, and Brent should be honest. Age-appropriate, but honest. "Sweetheart, those weren't vitamins. Mommy was giving you pills that made you sick. She did a very bad thing, which is why she's in jail." Emma processed this, her face serious. Did she not love me? The question pierced his heart. "I think Mommy was sick in a different way. Sick in her mind. And that sickness made her do terrible things. But that's not about you, Emma. You're wonderful and perfect and lovable. What Mommy did was her choice, her problem. Never yours. Do you think she still thinks about me? I don't know. Maybe. But what matters is that you're safe now, and you never have to see her again unless you choose to when you're older." Emma nodded, seeming satisfied with this answer. "I'm glad you're my dad. You saved me. You saved me too, kiddo, by being brave and strong." They sat together in comfortable silence, father and daughter, survivors of something unspeakable. Brent's phone buzzed. A text from Marcus Webb. "Final news. Gentry died in prison yesterday. Stabbed by another inmate who lost a child. Thought you should know." Brent stared at the message. He should feel something, satisfaction, closure, maybe even guilt. But all he felt was nothing. Douglas Gentry was gone, removed from the world by violence. The same violence he'd inflicted on innocents. Karma, maybe, or justice of a different kind. He wouldn't tell Emma. She didn't need to know that monsters could be killed by other monsters. She just needed to know she was safe. "Time to go home," Brent said, lifting Emma off his lap. Aunt Joe's making dinner. As they locked up the pharmacy and walked to their car, Emma slipped her small hand into his. "Dad, will you teach me about medicine when I'm older? How to help people like you do?" Brent smiled. "If that's what you want, absolutely. But you can be anything you want to be. Doctor, artist, astronaut. Whatever makes you happy. I think I want to help people. Like you helped me. Then I'll teach you everything I know." The Phoenix sunset painted the sky in oranges and purples as they drove home. Brent thought about the past year and a half. The horror of discovery, the fear of almost losing Emma, the satisfaction of trapping his enemies, the relief of justice. He'd started as a trusting husband, a careful pharmacist, a good father. He'd been forced to become an investigator, a strategist, a protector at any cost. But now he was just Brent again. Dad to Emma, brother to Joanna, pharmacist to his community. The scars remained, the wariness around pill bottles, the background checks he ran on anyone who got close to Emma, the nightmares that still came sometimes. But scars were proof of survival. Proof you'd fought something hard and won. At home, Joanna had made Emma's favorite, spaghetti and meatballs. They ate together, three people who'd been forged into a family by trauma, but stayed together by choice and love. To new beginnings, Joanna toasted with her water glass. To new beginnings, Brent agreed. And to beating the bad guys, Emma added, making them laugh. Later, after Emma was asleep and Joanna had gone home, Brent stood in his daughter's doorway watching her breathe. Healthy breaths, peaceful sleep, the simple miracle of a child who'd survived. He thought about Whitney, locked in a cell for the rest of her life. He thought about Gentry, dead in prison. He thought about Hassan, trying to rebuild a life destroyed by greed. Everyone had faced consequences for their choices. And Brent had made his choices too, to protect his daughter at any cost, to seek justice methodically and completely, to trap his enemies in their own lies. Those choices